Hello, TFO people, and welcome to another episode of Musician of the Week interviews. And with me today is Dr. Andrew Sehmann from Georgia. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm so glad to have you here on this quirky little show we've got going. Um, so, Andrew, how long have you played with TFO?
I have played for technically 2 seasons if we count 2019 and then 2020 as we went online.
Yes, absolutely. So you've been with us for the past 2 years. Excellent.
Yes.
And even though you're not a long haul TFO person, you're fairly new to the organization.
Mhm.
What is your favorite thing about TFO?
I like the kind of family atmosphere and how everyone gets along with everybody else, and there's a lot of camaraderie between the musicians, and it isn't just sort of like something where you show up to rehearsal, you play, and then you leave. You also hang out with your friends, talk with them, eat dinner with them, maybe make food together, etc.
Yeah, for sure. I think so too. And a lot of people have been saying that their favorite thing is the people. So I love it.
Mhm.
Another tally for the people. Awesome.
Good,
But you're
good.
not from Missouri, obviously. We touched on earlier
Mhm.
in Georgia. So where are you living and working for the rest of the year?
So I am currently in Athens, Georgia, and basically I've been living here for the past 5 years, where I was getting my master's and then my doctorate at the University of Georgia. I actually completed it last year in 2020 as the pandemic started. So I finished in May 2020, and since then I've actually lived in Athens, not just because of necessity, because of pandemic and it's a little hard to move, but also because I teach at two separate colleges, Georgia College and State University in Milledgeville, Georgia, and Young Harris College in Young Harris, Georgia. In addition to that, I'm also a member of the Atlanta Ballet Orchestra with Adam, our esteemed bassist friend who was on the show 2 times ago, 3 times ago. I can't remember how many times, but I play in there with him, and I'm a member of the Augusta Symphony in Augusta, Georgia.
That's awesome. You're a busy man.
Hmm.
All over the place.
It's been keeping me busy during even the pandemic stuff, and not performing so much, but the teaching aspect for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of work and the pandemic, what happened to you in your work, momentum, etc., when things started shutting down due to the global COVID-19 pandemic?
So, everything started shutting down around March, and basically, what I had planned on doing in March was actually taking a month off from performing so that I could basically get started on my dissertation work, because up until that point, I pretty much hadn't started. Um, which, for those of you who have written a dissertation, if you have to write it in March and April and then try to submit it by maybe May 1st, that's not a whole lot of time. Um, but what I ended up doing is taking time off then, and my last official performance in public up until that point was February 28th. Before then, I had been doing a recording project with the Augusta Symphony for new orchestral pieces by Miguel de la Guila, and I just got done playing Salome with the Atlanta Opera, which was really fun. I played my last doctorate recital in the middle of February, and then I played one kind of like run through performance of the Mozart Serenade in B flat, the Grand Partita, and then that was it. Working wise, I was working at Young Harris College and basically going up there once a week to teach lessons, and that was it. Um, Otherwise, so yeah, that's it.
Enough. So you planned to take a short break and got a much bigger break than you probably bargained for.
Yes, yes. Like I was sort of talking before we started recording, I don't think I would have finished my dissertation had we not had a pandemic, as crazy as that is to say. But I guess what are you going to do when you're stuck inside all day
Yeah,
but write a
right.
100-page paper?
Well, it's funny. A silver lining, to be sure. Blessing in disguise.
Yes,
The pandemic, making doctors of us all.
yes,
Funny.
yes.
Well, and you're in Georgia.
Uh,
Georgia's been kind of a
mhm.
wacky place lately.
Yep.
So, has your life at all been impacted by any of the like civil craziness that has been happening in addition to the pandemic?
So, in a very real way, I both it both has and hasn't, because like where I work in both towns, on the way to those towns, you see a lot of kind of crazy signs and stuff, but there's not a whole lot of like interaction with maybe some of the more wild people associated with those things and ideas. Um, but one of the things that's been very interesting is like my wife and I attended one of the George Floyd protests in Athens, and we actually saw cops using tear gas on protesters. We were leaving right as that started happening. Yeah, it was very scary. I was freaking out the whole time.
That's
Yeah,
scary.
yeah. Athens is it is sort of a hotbed, obviously, of like more leftist sentiment just by virtue of being close to the university and such. But um, I was surprised that they would even take that sort of action on protesters, where there were by the end, like people were leaving pretty much in droves, and they still used tear gas on about 50 protesters or so that remained behind. They were protesting a Confederate memorial that had been in Athens since the 1800s, and they did actually eventually tear it down. Um, Ironically, actually, move, they didn't tear it down and then just completely shelve it. They actually moved it literally about 20 feet from our house, which
Oh my god.
sucks. But no one knows where it is now, so you don't have people just visiting it constantly, and it's not in the middle of like downtown and stuff. So yeah,
Bizarre.
yes,
It's scary.
yes. Uh-huh.
So
So,
while not like directly impacted, you have bear witness to some
hmm
historical events.
hmm yes.
Well, so this has been kind of a good summary of uh, the whole year of 2020 and what a disaster it was. So, as a musician and as an artistic person, how do you think music and the arts will impact the whole healing process?
Um, I think a lot of different music is going to cause quite a bit of healing and a lot of change in at least our industry of like more classical music oriented stuff. Um, right now, I've started performing a lot of music by various composers I never thought I would, whether they be women of color, people of color, just in general, or anything of that sort. Even in the past year, I've started doing more of that as performances have started to come back in Augusta and with some of the college teaching jobs that I do. I also think like we can start to take examples from like Anthony McGill's Take Two Knees initiative, I believe is what it's called, right?
Yeah,
Um, yes, and I think, if anything, that was probably one of the most powerful statements to come out of the protest just by itself in general, and sort of made even more of a superstar out of the man than I think he was even before. A lot of people took notice
yeah,
to to that. So yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree that I think we're about to hear and learn about a lot more musicians and composers that we would not have heard about
hmm
um, had this stuff not happened. I know, like at TFO, we are gonna play Bach and Beethoven again this summer, but we are we're also including a lot of living composers, like we do every year, and
Right.
some ladies and some diverse people. We're
hmm
taking an example too. We're trying. It's hard.
it is hard.
You have to like be a scholar and go back and find that stuff, right? You can't.
Literally. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the Chevrolet de St. George or however you say his name.
Oh, Chevalier.
Most of that hasn't even really Chevalier. Okay, sorry. So
Just kidding.
so most of Chevalier de Saint George's music is still basically manuscript, right?
Right. Um, yeah, I've been trying to do some arrangements or some transcriptions, engraving of his sonatas for two violins
Hmm.
to like try and give people access to it. And yeah, they're a nightmare to
Yeah,
transcribe.
I'm
Just
sure.
yeah, it's a disaster. Like forget about running it through automatic scanning software.
Yeah, no, that's not gonna happen.
No, no, it's a mess. But hopefully we'll continue to make these things more accessible to both people who are listening and performing the music.
Right.
Ah,
Yeah.
so you're going to be you will be a part of the process, and you already
Yes.
are. Um,
Yes.
so having said all this, do you miss performing and teaching in person?
Ye- So the answer is technically yes, although I have now I actually have been doing I've had to do in-person teaching since August.
Oh
As
wow.
crazy as that is to say, yeah, that was real sketchy for a while, to the point where one of the universities I taught at, Young Harris, had to shut down for 2 weeks because too many people got sick.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's now better, but I don't know if that's because basically the entire student population caught it, or if that's because no. But overall, things there are a lot better now. Like everybody's now taking it a lot more seriously. I think some of the students weren't initially, but they are now.
Good.
But but yeah, we did as much as we could, but we had to go back in person in August, and so what I basically ended up doing is I've been teaching a lot of my classes and lessons. I've been actually teaching outdoors, as crazy as that is to say. Because I mean, I play French horn, and if you know French horn, the instrument actually faces backwards. And if you just no, seriously, if you stand 10 feet away from each other, there's no risk of getting any contamination as long as you're
Right.
outdoors. So I've been teaching outdoors since August, for all of my lessons, in person, as crazy as that is to say,
No, that's
all the
funny.
way
And
through
it's
winter, which
yeah, it's warm
all
enough there.
yeah, I did some lessons where it was 40 degrees outside, but the kids showed up. So I was cold, but I could run inside in between lessons, so it was okay.
Oh, that yep. Whatever you gotta do.
Yeah.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
with performances, I had one performance in October where Augusta Symphony performed live,
Mm,
some movie music concerts, but they weren't really performed live. We recorded them, in the middle of October, and it was the earliest I've ever played, Sleigh Ride. I can tell you that because we also recorded Christmas concerts during that time too. So
oh,
I
that's
recorded,
funny.
I played Sleigh Ride and a Santa hat on October 3rd, I think.
Weird.
Yeah, it was very strange. Like we recorded some movie music stuff for the first hour of the recording session, and then during the break they wheeled on Christmas trees to like make it look Christmassy and festive and stuff.
That's funny. And I know, like, if you're listening and you're from Branson, you're like, that's not weird. But but I think it's weird now, having moved
Yeah.
outside of it. That's funny though. Oh,
But after that, there was not much in the way of performing, kind of like back to how it normally was,
mm,
really until January. And then since January, I've had about one different performance of some sort each month, whether it be
yeah.
orchestral or chamber or something of that sort. So it's
Yeah,
at
but
least sort of coming back.
it's sort of coming back, but you're used to doing like way more
Yeah, I mean,
than one per month.
I'm used to doing, if not at least something once a week, potentially one to two different things a week.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
it's a
it's
pretty
still,
stark contrast.
it is very different.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I know like at TFO we're planning kind of a truncated version of our
Hmm.
season. We're doing like six in-person performances this summer,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is significantly smaller than what we're used to doing, but it's still a step toward normal.
Right.
Um, so what would it mean to you to perform in person with TFO this summer?
It would mean a lot just because I know I've performed a little bit with, basically Augusta Symphony, but I have not had a full orchestral experience that is, I would say, relatively normal since probably, last year, 2020 in February,
Yeah.
honestly. With Augusta, it's very highly like regulated. A lot of the brass instruments and woodwinds are within their own little plexiglass boxes to kind of prevent aerosol spread and such. And all the strings are in masks, and they're basically just kind of like separated and hoping that nobody gets sick during it, which is, and so I'm hoping, if we can be in person, and which I know that that's the plan, yay, that I'm hoping that everything just goes well and we can play outside and it feels normal for once, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I hope so too. And
Hmm.
and it'll mean the world to us if we have you back this summer and
Yeah.
we all can be back.
Hmm.
Um, well, thanks so much for talking to me, Andrew. This was
Hmm.
delightful to catch up and kind of talk through the exciting opportunities that the future will present in spite of everything that has happened over the last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today. Stay tuned next week for more musician features and interviews.